Well, fortunately, I have the opportunity today to meet with Jack Cowling, and Jack and I have spoken in the past about the connection of the world of a CFA, so a Certified Financial Analyst, and then a CFP, a Certified Financial Planner. So we were able to go back and forth and talk a little bit about that. As we're communicating here back and forth, I will hop around the website of Alta Vista, the company that Jack works with. And Jack, maybe we could start with you just giving a little bit of your background, and then Alta Vista. Why Alta Vista, and what makes your company unique?
Well, thank you for your time this morning. So, yeah, I mean, I started out in the trust investments area of a large national bank, and so I had an opportunity to really kind of get to know that part of the business and really just work with individual clients and some of their advisors. But again, it was coming at it from more of a bank trust department kind of background, and that really actually stuck with me throughout the years. I really take seriously the fiduciary obligation that the CFA charter is about, and I know that's also something that CFPs take really seriously as well, and that just kind of stuck with me as I kind of progressed in my career, and eventually ended up at Alta Vista, which was really a good opportunity because I was looking for something in more of a smaller company environment. One of the things that I found about larger companies is that things get a little siloed, and you can do some interesting work in one area, but what I found was that if you really if you're kind of an extroverted type person and you like working with people and clients, then an RIA type environment and working for a firm like Alta Vista, which does comprehensive financial planning, really allows you to kind of have the best of both worlds. So being able to, work on some of those interesting research projects that, the CFA is really all about, but also then being able to see how that pulls through, not just from a theoretical standpoint, but also from an application standpoint. So sometimes, there's, you find that what works in theory doesn't always work in application, and so that's where, you take some of the science that, the CFP is good at teaching, I think, and then, how does that pull through to actual client situations and, human beings. So Alta Vista is a great firm, and work with a number of CFPs, so you get the opportunity, here to really work with some smart people.
I like that a lot. When you think about the CFA, because I do have students who come, high analytics, come from the investments world. Can you talk a little bit about your overlay of your CFA into a CFP practice? Because there are some practices out there, and I think you and I talked about this last time, that are utilize a TAMP, a turnkey asset management program, where they don't even select, sometimes they'll select the asset class but not the individual securities that go inside of an asset class. So a lot of students haven't been exposed to that conceptually before. Can you talk a little bit about how you fit in and how your CFA has led you, from banking to where you are today as a member of this team producing holistic financial planning?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for that. So, from a CFA level type person's perspective, really you can really be that investment expert for the team. And so it's a little bit more narrow focus in terms of, what I think the value proposition is as an investment guy on, a team of financial planners who really, have expertise in a lot of different areas. And so what typically happens in a situation where you're bringing on a client that has some fairly complex needs or maybe some legacy assets, and they just really need that, additional investment expertise, whether it's thinking about things like tax location and how do you, gear an entry strategy for a client that maybe has some low basis securities and things of that nature. And maybe it's just a client that needs just some additional reassurance and needs to really know how the sausage is made a little bit more than perhaps your typical client.
Mm-hmm.
So, every client's a little bit different in terms of what their needs are. And so, I get to really work with some good, smart people, CFP level people. And so oftentimes we'll team up with a client that has a fairly complex situation, and maybe they're working with multiple advisors. And we really think about how we can bring it all together. And investments, quite honestly, is just only one small piece of the overall puzzle. It's an important piece, but we're also thinking about how this integrates with their overall liquidity needs. How does this integrate with the money that they need to, because we deal with a lot of business owners here at Ultra Vista.
Mm-hmm.
So, what money do we need to have kind of set aside in a more diversified liquid portfolio to grow, at a more consistent rate, that's going to, essentially be their retirement capital or their family security capital versus, what do we set aside for them to go out and start new businesses and really, kind of satisfy that entrepreneurial bug that they have. So, we get to work with some really great clients as a result, and they can often challenge us, which I think is a good thing. And, I think having a CFA level person on staff, really helps reinforce that value proposition around how we can integrate some of the financial planning with, and improve on a more traditional money management model, if that makes sense.
It does a lot, actually. With the CFA, so sometimes students will ask me, should I go on and get my CFA? And I think a lot of people don't realize, I've explained the difference between the CFA and the CFP this way. The CFP tends to be about a mile wide and a foot deep, and the CFA tends to be about a foot wide and a mile deep. Obviously, that's an exaggeration, but I think it helps to contextualize how deep the CFA goes in a niche, or it's not really niche, but in a specific area that is a module of financial planning. With the CFA, it's about a 2 to 3 year commitment, right? And
Right.
When you're thinking about a 22-year-old, is this something for somebody who wants to be a financial planner and who plans on getting the CFP, should they consider the CFA?
So if their real passion is doing the financial planning, the comprehensive financial planning, so the cash flow, the tax strategy, doing the whole full balance sheet type analysis, I would say start with your passion and, pursue the CFP. And, once you've done that, if you also have a particular passion too around a particular area like the investments, I have seen people who, really just kind of like that lifelong learning. I've seen them actually go on to get the CFA as well. So, and I've seen the opposite. I've seen people have gone through the CFA program and they decide, this is a little bit too narrow of a focus for me, and they sort of naturally over time gravitated to, taking on, more of a broader scope of things, from a balance sheet perspective, and they decide that, really what they want to do is focus on the financial planning aspect, and so they'll actually kind of go the other way and, start going the CFP route. So I think the two really kind of complement each other. And for people that really kind of have that lifelong learning commitment, I think it's, definitely viable. So, and a good thing.
That's good. That's good. Let's change gears for a minute and talk a little bit. The students and I, we talk a lot about the practice of planning and even the practice in the investments world. What do we do from a practical side day to day? But we also try to take a step back and more broadly develop a philosophy, because our philosophy is going to guide our practice oftentimes in the investments world. Can you talk a little bit, you've had a lot of wisdom through the experience that you've had in business for a long period of time. Can you talk a little bit about your investment philosophy and how that informs informs the way that you approach clients or the firm that you work with, or just as students begin to, early on in their career, develop their own philosophy around investments. Can you talk about how you've come to your knowledge or understanding about the investments world and the influence that has over how you educate clients and things of that nature?
Oh, absolutely. And, I think it's a great question. And so, I've learned a lot being part of Ultra Vista, where, traditionally the CFA level person is really kind of looking at things with a more narrow focus. And so, what I found with working with CFPs and clients is that, stepping back, there is I think an intersection there between, the CFP program and the comprehensive financial planning and also the investment piece. And so, doing some goals-based type planning, I think, helps the client keep committed to their investment plan. And so, oftentimes when we think about investments, or classic mean variance type analysis, where you're doing optimization and things like that, you just oftentimes practitioners, if you were in a traditional money management shop or even brokerage type firm, will just fill out a, quick investment questionnaire and, out pops the optimal portfolio. And I think really you have to go much deeper than that. And I think that's where the value of financial planning comes in, because you get into things like, the liquidity discussion and, money you need to keep aside to really, avoid panicking when markets do get volatile. And it's also about thinking about what are your ultimate goals and how are you going to get there. And so, how much do you save? It's not just about asset allocation. For some clients, particularly, people that don't have a lot of savings, what's really going to move the dial for them? Is it really the asset allocation as much as it is just getting them on a consistent savings program? So there's all sorts of levers that I think that, working a CFP level person and CFA level person working together, it almost becomes kind of magical, where you can pull on all these different levers and, really, I think, do something that can really add some value for the ultimate client. And so I don't know if that gets so much into investment philosophy as much as it kind of gets into just a general kind of perspective on how investments fits into the overall picture.
Yeah, one of the things I talk about with students a lot is you probably get this a lot. People come up to you and ask you for a hot stock tip when they find out that you're in the industry. And, I'm nice about it, but what goes on in my head instantaneously is there isn't one, Yeah. And my first question always is, well, how much money do you have? Because if you don't have any money, then it doesn't really matter, does it? So it has to do with the first step before you ever begin to think about where you're going to invest is savings. So it's a cash flow decision, which is pretty much what you hit on there, working with cash flows on the front end so that we actually can think about asset allocation, location, some of these other issues.
Exactly, and that really kind of pulls through to the investment philosophy question. And so we really do emphasize asset allocation. And then in and around that, how do you implement that? And so, at our firm, we really emphasize getting low-cost diversification. We do tilt things a little bit more towards the value factor if you're kind of thinking of this in terms of a Fama French three-factor model.
Yep.
So, we do, tilt things from a factor standpoint, but ultimately what we're trying to achieve is low-cost diversification. And then, controlling the things you can control, like cost, which is really important, obviously, with markets being, fairly efficient, and then also with tax locations. So, being able to kind of pull on all those different levers, I think is really important. And then just kind of understanding what the underlying motivations are of the client, which, it's a little bit more complicated than I think standard mean variance, because, you've got clients that might be more traditional classic mean variance where, they tend to be more risk averse. They're going to want to earn higher returns. for more risk. And then you have, other clients, entrepreneurial clients who, really just honestly tend to be more risk-seeking. They just love, the idea of being able to find a new opportunity, the next Google or, fill in the blank. So, you have to be able to kind of satisfy, I think, that entrepreneurial gene and be able to do some goals-based planning, looking at your balance sheet and cash flow and saying, let's take care of your family first. And let's put that into a more traditional asset allocation of liquid investments, maximizing diversification. And then to the degree that you want to set aside some money, call it a mad money account or, risk capital, whatever you want to call it, to the degree that you can allocate some excess funds over and above what you need to kind of take care of your family and basic needs, then, you allow for that, but you put in some guardrails. And so, does that kind of fall within the traditional model, of money management? No. But, I think that it helps clients stay committed to the important things. And, it recognizes that clients may, not be the, might not be the rational, mean variance type investor described in more classic economic, models.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Even when you think about a lot of the underlying assumptions in a lot of research is a rational agent, and we realize in financial planning that there can be a disconnect. Individuals are oftentimes rational in their own mind or even in their own scenario, but when you get into trying to help people out, sometimes there's a whole lot of education well before you get into the deep portfolio analysis. I know I said I wouldn't keep you much longer than we have thus far. I know your time's really valuable, and I appreciate you investing. Maybe I'll give you one last question that I ask almost everybody. You can answer this in a financial planning way, or you can talk personally. If your current self, or say that your 30 or 40-year-old self had an opportunity to go back and have a 15-minute conversation with your 20-year-old self, what would you say?
Oh, wow.
It's a tough question. I had to ask myself that the first time, and when somebody asked me, I sat stumped, and I thought, dang, what would I say? Tell myself to make wiser decisions than I have thus far. Well, maybe from a career standpoint even.
So, here's what I would say. Give yourself, a little grace, and it's important to, focus on, what your career goals are and, to study hard, but also, don't forget to cultivate the important relationships in your life, whether it's your colleagues, your family, just, try to, make sure that you maintain that balance. And, because, a lot of us in our profession are very goal-oriented, type A type personalities. And so, I would just say, that's all important, but, don't forget to cultivate those relationships, because it really is a small world out there. And I think as I, have gotten older and hopefully a little bit more wiser, my wife does question that sometimes. But, just making sure that you make time for yourself and those that are important in your life. Just say thank you.
Yeah, when I was working with clients that in people who were later in life, that was one of the privileges of being a financial planner, is I had the opportunity to peer into people's financial and personal life. And numerous times when I had individuals who were later in life, those were the conversations that they had. It was about their kids. Their number one asset was their kids. And they just talked about passing on their values or the investment of time. They wish if there's anything they could have done differently, it normally came down to, I wish I would have allocated time here or there. So, sage advice for sure, to invest in the things that matter. So that's really good. Well, Jack, I really appreciate you spending the time together with us, sharing a little bit of your story. your journey into planning, where the world of CFA and CFP meet, and even as you develop your investment philosophy. Some of our students in our capstone classes, they are developing an investment policy too, so their investment policy statements, some of that's guided from their active versus passive decisions, which is a pretty big area of argument inside of our profession, depending on who you're talking to. So I appreciate you sharing a little bit of that with us in your perspective. And again, Altra Vista, I hope someday we can bring some of our students down there to visit on site.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you, and thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure.